Hi, I'm Elsa Wood from Wye Valley Sculpture Garden. I've been collecting snowdrops since the late 70s really. We started collecting snowdrops because we had this idea back in the 1970s of having a winter garden, and obviously snowdrops are a constituent part of a winter garden. So we went to a local nursery and we were given 10 bulbs of Atkinsii, which which are now called James Backhouse, I think, and then we put them in the garden. And they spread and they spread, and they just look so lovely in the winter. We went to a nursery in Devon and I got a pot. This was in the middle of the summer, a pot full of nothing. And within it just had a label which said Merlin, and within it there were about 10 bulbs. And put those in the garden, and they've flourished, and we've got Merlin all over the garden as well. I think when Ro and I went to Colesbourne, we agonised over the fact we couldn't possibly spend £10 on Colossus, and went and had a cup of tea and looked at each other and said, oh yes we can. And now we've got thousands and thousands of Colossus. Snowdrops originate from various parts of the world. I have a friend who spent a long time policing the theft, if you like, of snowdrops in Turkey. So certainly Eastern Europe, but also parts of Asia. It's very difficult to sort of pinpoint because of the different numbers of species. They come from, various parts of the world. What is probably certain is that they're not native to Britain, but when they came over to Britain is open to question, really. Some speculation that came over with the Romans. It's probably a subject I need to research a bit more. I don't think anyone's got any definite answers. When I looked in the look in the floor, it just sort of says they are, they're probably archaeophytes, which means they were here before the 1500s, but exactly when they came in, I really wouldn't like to say, but they've certainly been in this country a long time. They belong to the family Amaryllidaceae, which is basically the Amaryllis family, and it's daffodils, leucojums and so on are in the same family as well. Sort of fairly closely related to the lily family, but it's not, it's a different family. There are basically 3 different leaf forms within the snowdrops. Within the bulb, the leaves have different formations as they develop. The most simple are the nivalis type, where one leaf is flat against the other one, and they come up as rather sort of thin leaves. But you also have the plicatus type, where in the bulb the leaves are curled backwards, and as the leaves emerge, you can see that the leaves are folded backwards, and those are plicatus type. The third main type are the Elwesii group, where you've got within the bulb you've got one leaf wrapped around the other one. So as they emerge, if you actually look at the base of the stem, you can see one leaf wrapped around the other. And those leaves are often really quite broad, often grey, very distinctive, the Elwesii type. There are considered to be about 20 different species of snowdrop worldwide. New varieties are being named all the time. It's one of those species or groups of species that do hybridize, and they produce aberrant forms. And any one year, one person can find several new snowdrops. And I think the sort of current thought is that there are in excess of 2,000 named varieties. But I suspect that just goes up every year. I mean, even within our own garden, we find different ones. Rather interesting, sort of neat little double with a very broad outer tepals, which is intriguing me. We have about 75 to 80 different varieties here in the Wye Valley Sculpture Garden. Well, if you're a true galanthophile, you'll collect the varieties and the species that start in autumn right through to the ones that are still flowering in the end of March. So you can have snowdrops 6 months of the year. People think they're incredibly ephemeral, but with all the different species and varieties, you can really extend the season. The early Regina olgai, come out in the autumn, and some of the late plicatus group are still flowering towards the end of March. So, it's quite a good season. Well, I talked about the bulb and the different way the leaves are folded within the bulb. From the bulb, it produces a scape or a stem on which the flowers are subtended. It's not a true flower in the sense that it's got petals. They are modified petals, if you like, and you've got a whirl of outer tepals, usually 3, but in some of the varieties, you can get up to 6. and then the inner tepals, which are the smaller little whorl inside, which usually have green markings on in some form or another. And it's the way these green markings are configured that often give you the rather sort of special names. Like if they've got little faces, they can be grumpy or they can be wasp. Well, I do love all the snowdrops, otherwise I wouldn't have them in the garden. But I suppose that some of the original ones we got, like the Atkinsii, I'm particularly fond of. They're a good doer, and we now have them all over the garden. And again, as I mentioned before, the Merlins with those lovely green inner tepals are really one of my favourites. The lovely yellow form of Primrose Warburg and some of the other yellows, which have yellow ovaries and lovely yellow markings on the inner tepals instead of green ones, they're particularly special. And the ones that you can have on the Christmas table, Colossus, Mrs. McNamara, they're really wonderful to have a whole bowl of beautifully cut fresh snowdrops for Christmas. It wouldn't be Christmas without fresh snowdrops on the table. We were given 3 or so bulbs of Augustus to celebrate the birth of my grandson, and he's now 23, and we have a lovely garden, a lovely big spreads of Augustus now, and that's a very special one. Dionysus, well, another one that came from Andy Byfield's garden. Again, just one bulb, and now it's we must have thousands of them. As we're ecologists, one of the most important things to us obviously is diversity and wildlife, and on a lovely sunny day you can see bees and sometimes hoverflies that come out in the winter or are still active in the winter collecting the nectar from the snowdrops, so they're incredibly important as a nectar source for insects in the winter as well. At all times, but particularly in this time of lockdown, just walking out into the garden and just being amongst the snowdrops gives one a most wonderful sense of well-being, a sense of calm, tranquility, and just joy. And it's just wonderful to be amongst them. And it's so important, not just for us here, but for everybody to experience the wonders of, plants, animals, all aspects of wildlife. Just so important for humans' well-being. This is a poem by Mary Webb, and it's called Snowdrop Time. Ah, hush, tread softly through the rhyme, for there will be a blackbird singing or a thrush. Like coloured beads the elm buds flush, all the trees dream of leaves and flowers and light. And see, the northern bank is much more white than frosty grass, for now is snowdrop time.